you have to stay cool, because if you get too elated and to this, to that, you're gonna oversee and have a narrow vision of something that you're neglecting in your game because you think other things are going really well. Or if you're too low, where I see so many young players and other people get so hard on themselves, they just sort of forget about the attributes that they're given, and they just sort of focus on the mistakes.
The goal of the Best You podcast is to allow you to feel confident about what you need to do, why you need to do it, and how to do it in order to get closer and closer to your best you. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am really excited to be joined by the one and only Taylor Washington. Taylor, I just want to start off by saying thanks so much for spending the time with me today during your recovery day.
No, dude, I'm super stoked. I think we go back a little bit further because I remember seeing you at Boost back in the day.
Yeah.
So super excited since it was you. I was like, heck yeah, it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, man, no doubt. So the way I kind of want to start off today, Taylor, is getting a little bit more of your backstory, getting into the game. I kind of understood that, you played obviously all throughout high school, and then 1 year at Boston University, and then a few years at George Mason University. And I think a lot of times when you see a professional athlete, you think the traditional thought in their head is they have the dream as a little kid that they want to play that professional sport. And then when they get to high school and college, that dream just grows and grows, and I really want to make it to that next level. But from what I understand is that wasn't necessarily your path. You didn't really think that becoming a professional soccer player was really what you wanted to do, maybe until maybe like senior year of college. And from what I understood is you saw this My Wish episode on SportsCenter, I think on ESPN, and you're like, man, this soccer goalie had such an impact on this kid, and this is something that I could have a platform for and maybe have an impact on other people's lives as well. So I want you to take us down a little more of the decision-making process and like the thought process in your head of like, okay, this is definitely something I'm actually going to go for.
Yeah, you did your homework. Wow, not a lot of people know that story about me. But yeah, that was pretty much what sort of transcended my desire to be a professional athlete. When I was at Boston University, I'd come off of being, rated #1 player in New York State, tons of accolades, different things. And when I got to BU, I was sick with mononucleosis. And that season for me was one of the toughest years of my life. I was struggling in school. I was struggling off the field. I was struggling a little bit on the field. And I really had an identity crisis. And I'll never forget, it was towards the end of the first semester, and I met with my academic advisor. And I had missed so many classes just from I'd wake up, train, and then I would be so exhausted from the mono. And I didn't know I had mono at the time. I would go back and crash for 4 or 5 hours and miss a class or two. Little did I know that affected my GPA big time. But I didn't miss too many classes, but when I did, the teacher would be like, you're doing well enough in school. You seem like you have an intelligent brain, but it just seems like a disconnect. And I went and got tested, found out that I had dyslexia. And then what really sort of changed my life is that I had a special encounter with the Lord. I was sort of sitting at this desk, and my academic advisor at the time was like, you either have to withdraw from school or you have to get a 2.9 GPA minimum to stay at BU. And I remember just thinking to myself, wow, I feel so much anxiety, so much just weight on my shoulders. And this it was sort of like Paul on the way to Damascus, this gold light hit me. Hadn't thought about going to church, hadn't thought about anything along those lines. And the next thing I know is I'm throwing myself into Sunday morning mass and trying to get to know the Lord better. And slowly his hand over my life changed everything. I transferred from Boston University, found out I was dyslexic, was able to get a 3.9 GPA, becoming a bio major. And that was my real goal, is I always wanted to be a surgeon. My grandmother was very sick growing up, and I watched enough Grey's Anatomy that I thought, dang, that's a really cool show. And I wanted to help people. That was always sort of my goal. And, God put things in my life that have sort of on the way, I always thought it was man, I'm failing, man, I'm doing this, but he was actually sharpening me and making me go down his path. And, when I was going into my senior year, I was training with DC United. I was the captain of the team at the time, but I hadn't thought about like pro. Like I trained with the first team, and I remember I pulled into the training facility, and I was like, these guys are getting massages, and they're doing this, and they're driving Benzes, and I was like, damn, that's pretty cool. But still, like my thought wasn't I want to be a pro athlete. And I remember one day I came home and I was watching a Joe Hart Make-A-Wish video, and I burst into tears. I was like so overwhelmed by like what this was able to do for a young child who had cancer. Like he didn't have any pain that day. He didn't have any worries about the cancer that was going on. Like he just was immersed in the moment and enjoying being around someone that he loved and admired. And I was like, if I can do that, Lord, for one kid, like then I know that like my life will mean something. And it was God answered my prayer. Like I went pro the following year, and I met a young boy named Dominic who had brain cancer. And as much as I would like to say I touched his life, he changed my life in more ways than ever I could imagine. And it made being a professional athlete mean so much more. And yeah, it's kept me going to this day.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important that you establish at such an early point in your professional career a reason for being a professional athlete outside of just the fact that you're an athlete, because I think that's what a lot of people go through. And ultimately, when a professional athlete retires, if they never had any meaning outside of being an athlete in the first place, then they don't have anything to sustain them moving forward. And for you to do that at such a young age, it's super admirable. I kind of want to stick to the soccer career a little bit further in the beginning, though. You said you turned professional right after that, but then it took a little bit of time, I guess, until 2017 when you got signed with the Nashville Soccer Club. But that time it was still the USL, and then a couple years later, when they transitioned to the MLS, you were one of a few people that got signed to an MLS contract. So tell me a little bit about what that was like, going from USL to then MLS contract. Like, was that something that you were expecting? Was that something that was like, holy crap, this is awesome? Tell me a little bit about that moment.
I'll be completely honest. I remember when I came down to Nashville, my agent at the time, he said, Nashville's getting a soccer club or a soccer team. And I was like, that's sick. Where? And I was like, he's like, Nashville, Tennessee. And I was like, oh, sick. Okay, cool. And I had an option in my contract where I was. But the coach, it was wild. It was wild how God worked. Like the coach gave us an opportunity to either say yes or no to whatever decision they made. So like if they wanted to pick up my option, they're going to ask me beforehand, hey, do you want us to pick it up? And that's what went with me. I said, with all due respect, like I would love for you to decline it. I think I would rather pursue playing somewhere else. And when I came here, like my goal was just to live each day in that moment. Like I didn't think about MLS. At the time I was fighting for just even a starting position. And I'd come from a team where, we weren't doing great, but I was playing a ton. And now Nashville in the USL had a ton of great players at different positions. It was like we had a deep roster. And I think making the 18 at the time was even a thought. I was like, ooh, I just really want to make the 18. And then I want to fight for my starting 11 spot. And the thought of transitioning to MLS never even really crossed my mind. Like I was just sort of like, oh, am I going to play in this game? Am I going to impact the team positively? Am I going to be able to do these things either in the community or this or that? And after 2 years, I remember I stepped into the trailer at Ensworth, and Mike and Gary, I think I was one of the last meetings. They're like, we're going to be taking you with you to MLS. And I got up across the table, hugged both of them. And Gary, I still remember, he's like, I'm going to tell you one more thing, but just don't give me any more cuddles. And I was so elated and so taken back by the fact that they believed in me, that they were going to give me an opportunity to jump with them to the next level. It was one of the most humbling experiences of my life.
Man, that's awesome. So was there a period of time during the year that they were transitioning when everybody was kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't really know. Like, have you heard anything? So like, what was that kind of like?
Yeah, I remember with 2 or 3 months to go, one of the dudes had bought a house, and I was like, oh, maybe he knows, like he just bought a house, and he always said it was an investment. But he was one of our best players, and I think all of us sort of knew he was going to go. But the rest of the guys, if you told me of the four of us that went, I would have guessed, not myself, but the other three, and then maybe another two, like that ended up didn't get selected. And I think all of us were sort of just like, like, yeah, like we were all thinking about MLS, but at the time we also wanted to make the most of what we had. Like we were really close knit guys that hung out a lot off the field as well. And I think all of us had this like belief that like, all right, no matter what, a lot of us probably are not going to be here. So let's give our all, like, let's make the most of this experience. Let's see if we can win a championship. And that's one of the things too. It's like, I still think to this day, we probably could have just fell short. But that was the beauty of that team is that we all sort of had that common goal of, yes, we all wanted to, at the end of the day, make it to MLS, but we all wanted to win. We all wanted to win the USL championship. And unfortunately, it never happened.
And so when you guys transitioned to the MLS, did you feel this increased internal sense of urgency? Like, okay, now we're in the big leagues. Now I've got to even step my game up even further. Did everybody have an increased sense of urgency, or was that always kind of there?
To be honest, for me, it was I had a calmness, if that makes any sense. I had that inner sense of urgency that I wanted to be better, and that the expectation was for me to raise my confidence levels, to raise my playing levels. But I had this weird inner sense of calm that, each day when I wake up and I attack sort of like being your best you, that all of the rest would sort of take care of itself. And thanks be to God, that sort of happened. I walked into preseason and, I exceeded my own expectations. I remember after the first 2 weeks, they reassessed me and were like, hey, you need to be a little bit more aggressive. Like the things that got you here are what got you here. Don't play like how you think we want you to play or this or that. Play what got you here and use the attributes that you were given and be aggressive. And I remember that sort of flipped the switch for me. That little bit of feedback, because I was playing well, but there was definitely a level or two that I hadn't hit yet. And I just remember feeling that sort of sense of calm, of knowing my purpose each day going into practice and attacking that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One of the things I'm interested in all different sports, but soccer in particular, because it's such a long season, is how to handle the different emotions that inevitably come with the season. It's funny. There's a new Derek Jeter documentary on Hulu called The Captain, and it's really good. And with a baseball season, it's long as hell. They have 162 games, and there's inevitably going to be times where they're playing really well, and inevitably going to be times where you're going through a slump. And soccer season's super long as well. And so, what's the appropriate way to manage yourself and manage your emotions throughout the season so that they don't either get the best of you, whether it's too high of an emotion or too low of an emotion?
That's a great question. Actually, one I've never gotten before. Wow. Excuse me. That's really good. Wow. How do I approach that? Well, I also choke.
Yeah, take your time with that. I mean, like I said, I know it's a
more the
tough
joke
question.
I didn't want to cough on in the podcast. So what I would say is, when I was growing up, my dad, he was an athlete. Like, went to Chicago Bears preseason, got hit to the point where he had his 8th concussion, second hematoma, took a year off, played professional baseball, or made the professional baseball Kansas City Royals AA team. And growing up, sports was always quintessential for me. I was always doing something revolving around sports. And he always would tell me, don't get too high, don't get too low. And he'd always sort of put this wave in the middle. And that's sort of one of the things I always try and achieve. It's like, even if I have an amazing game or if you have a bad practice, you always sort of have to keep an even cool, right? Like, sort of like Derek Jeter talks about, he never, he walked in every day and earned his spot, right? Mm-hmm. Like he always was competing and all these different things. And it's always sort of keeping that middle ground with an edge. It's like a samurai sharpening his swords every day, even though he may not have to go to battle. You have to stay cool, because if you get too elated and to this, to that, you're going to you're going to oversee and have a narrow vision of something that you're neglecting in your game because you think other things are going really well. Or if you're too low, where I see so many young players and other people get so hard on themselves, they just sort of forget about the attributes that they're given and they just sort of focus on the mistakes. But I think another thing too would be community, like the teammates that I have around me, always have a positive outlook. We're always sort of lifting each other up, or, the captains and the leaders on our team. They really do an amazing job of keeping the locker room sort of that even keel, where it's like we're all hungry for what's next. We don't forget what we've done, but we are also in the present moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that last part, I think that's key. It's because only in the past can you really get too elated or too down on yourself, right? It's like if you're just in the present moment, nothing's currently happening. Nothing's necessarily good or bad right now. It just is. Rather than just living off the high of a past win or living on the down of a past loss. I think that's really critical. I think that's a really great takeaway, is try not to live too much off of past success or not success, and just kind of try to be in the present moment.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you look at any team, if they're living off their past success, then they're too cocky, right? Then a team who is at the bottom of the table could easily take their place. But then if they're living in the past on the failure, then they're going to stay there, right? Because sort of what you set your mind on, you're going to attract. I'm 100%. A firm believer in that. And it's like The Power of Now by, I think it's Eckhart Tolle. I've read so many excerpts from that book, and I bought it and just haven't read it. But it's like when you really are in the presence and you're immersed in what you're doing, and you can sort of achieve that flow state, all those good things are just going to sort of flow to you, and you got to have that positive mindset. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in the people around you. And in a sport like soccer, where it is such a team game, you got to believe in the people around you. The minute that you sort of just either focus on yourself or different things, you don't know what world you can sort of get into.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I mean, I'm a firm believer in that, like, obviously what you put your energy towards or what you put your energy on is going to largely determine what your emotions are. And if you put your energy towards a past high or past low, that's going to determine your emotions. But if you put your energy on today's practice or the next opponent, then, today's practice or next opponent is not good or bad because you haven't won or lost yet. It just is. And so, yeah, no doubt. I like that. I think that's super insightful. One of the things I also wanted to get your take on is one of the things I think just in life in general, oftentimes people only prepare for an opportunity that they see coming rather than just in constant preparation of a potential opportunity that could arise, but they don't really have faith or belief that anything will. And the way that I want to kind of translate to soccer is coming off of the bench. It's like, how do you stay physically and mentally ready on the bench if you don't know, you have no idea if you're going to go make it to the game or not, but if your number is called, you have got to be as physically and mentally ready as humanly possible. So how can you stay physically and mentally ready for an opportunity that you have no idea whether or not it's going to present itself?
Yeah, that's another good question, and one I got recently. Where I am, so Dan Lovitz is the primary left back, and so I'm his backup, and he was yellow card accumulation. So that means that I had to step into the role. And a lot of the questions in the media were that. It's like, so how do you prepare for, each and every week and each and every game, or even as a sub, And I think if you went around our locker room and you asked every single person that question, you get the same response. It's like, because one, it's our job. Two, it's who I believe God created each and every one of us to be, right? We're all people who, we don't wake up and we go to training and go, yeah, I'll try in this drill, or maybe I'll try in that drill. It's like, no, we're given the blessing of an opportunity just to even be on the bench or to be able to go into the game. So it's like, you have to be ready. It's in your DNA. It's almost instinctual. It's almost like walking and breathing, or it's like planning out your day. It's like, you're going to have breakfast, you're going to have lunch, you're going to have dinner. Like, you have to be ready to sort of step into the game. and how Gary has used subs and different things, we all know that we could all go into the game. And it's also something that we always desire too, on top of that. So it's like, we all want to play. We all want to impact the team positively. So it's like that moment for us when it does come, it's like, here I am. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to help the team in the best way that I know how, and hopefully come away with 3 points.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that you said that I wrote down that I think is insightful from a high performer point of view is, I wrote down professional athletes don't pick and choose. They don't pick and choose when they're going to bring their best foot forward. They don't pick and choose when they're going to bring the best version of themselves to the table. Because that's something that I've thought a lot about is if you can bring the best version of yourself to as many different opportunities or hopefully, all the opportunities that present themselves to you, then that's when you're going to get the best outcomes. And I've thought about it as, as stupid as bring the best version of yourself to the grocery store because you never know who you're going to meet in the aisle.
That's not even stupid. That is 1,000% true. Yes.
Right.
Right. That is the definition of like what I think your podcast embodies and what more people need to achieve. Right. But Michael Jordan didn't go into a practice and go, yeah, maybe I'll do it today. Maybe I won't. No, Tiger Woods doesn't do that. All these people who are the upper echelon of whatever, they are bringing their best version of themselves because at the end of the day, if you go to bed and you think, okay, I didn't do this today, I didn't do that, you're going to be really motivated to be the best version of yourself the following day. But some people will go to bed and think, oh, I didn't do this. And then they have to live with that regret. And that is something for, I think, any high performance person, whether you're an athlete, a surgeon, a speaker, a trainer, whatever it is, you live with that model. It's like that. It's not a fear of regret, but it's just like, I never want to touch that. Even if you have or haven't, no one wants to live that way. And it's like intrinsically built or, whatever you want to say, nature, nurture, it's there. And it carries people to be that high performer.
So good. So good. One of the things that makes you such a special person and special athlete is the fact that you do want to give back. I think last year you won the award from the Nashville Soccer Club of Humanitarian of the Year. And as you've already touched on, how one of the things that really got you into the game and sparked you to want to become a professional athlete is how you can make an impact off of the field. And you've touched on a couple of the things that you do. But where I'm getting is I think that one of the biggest aspects of getting closer to the best version of yourself is not only just gaining your own knowledge, skills, and competence, but it's also building the spirit of wanting to use that knowledge, skills, and experience for the good of others, right? I use the word being reciprocal with the things that you have and the competence that you have. And I've always been interested as to how much, it's obviously always going to be a combination of both for anything, but the nature versus nurture when it comes to kind of the spirit of wanting to give back. And how does, and I guess kind of the question is, how do you think one builds the spirit or builds the willingness to want to use their uniqueness in the service of others? We'll be back to the interview in just a second. But first, I wanted to share a quick testimonial from a past participant of the 10-week transformation program. I started running the 10WT in the beginning of 2020, and I've had over 150 people and counting go through it, and they've seen amazing results both inside and out. If you're inspired to join after listening to the testimonial, then go to nickcarrier.com to learn more. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, but first, here's what they had to say.
Hi, my name's Addison. I joined Nick's 10-week program because I was having a hard time figuring out exactly what kind of workouts I wanted to do. I used to be a college athlete, so I was used to some type of structure when I was working out. And Nick's workouts really implement a lot of different parts of athleticism. There's weightlifting, cardio, and then agility stuff. So that was something that really drew me to this program. It's been great ever since. I've done 3 or 4 now, and I'm already signed up for the next one. My favorite part, honestly, it's like good community that comes out of it. I've met a few friends through it and people that are just super encouraging that I definitely would have have met otherwise. You know, there's people from all different backgrounds and ages and whatnot, so it's cool to be in a diverse group of people. My goals were like a little bit weight loss, a little bit improvement on my running. I was trying to lose 10 pounds over the 10 weeks and then be able to go 45 minutes running straight, and I've actually done both of those 2 weeks early, so I'm just in a little bonus zone, so that's been great. You should join Nick's 10-week program.
Well, I think if you look at it, we all have it within ourselves. If you watch, they did a little not small video, but they did a video of a young boy named Colby who was involved with our Make-A-Wish. And so I've known Colby for 3 years. He was part of Make-A-Wish during the USL days, and I'm actually seeing him tonight for a dinner. But if you watch how he interacts with everyone in the locker room, everyone's face lights up. You know, their heart is touched, and they're changed. You know, and it's like, could you say, is it them, or is it the situation that they're in that sort of softens, or whatever you want to call it, changes their heart? And I think we all have that within us, you know, and that call and that feeling to sort of give to others. I don't know how to explain it. You know, it's like something that is just, it's like breathing, you know, like at some level, we all realize that, we're not that big, you know, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the world around us is better than what's in us, you know?
That's, yeah. Well, and there's so much more to get from the world around you rather than just from what's within you.
Yeah. 1000%. Yeah. I mean, like the feeling of, for me, even after a loss or a win, you know, the feeling that you walk around the stadium and there are kids there who, they don't care if we won or lost. You know, like they are there to experience something, and it's like it makes whatever the result was. It's like you can deal with it so much easier that way, you know. And I think especially with children, man, like children are just such a gift. You know, they put so many things into different perspective, and they humble you and they educate you all at the same time. And it's like if we could all sort of hang out at a school for like a day, I think we'd all like do better in our jobs and different things. Even if you like kids or not, because you'll eventually you'll be overtaken by the goodness.
Mm-hmm. Well, honestly, one of the things that you kind of revealed to me through what you said, when there's kids around the locker room and everybody lights up from it. And, you know, when I said what allows somebody to build the spirit or the willingness of wanting to give back, I think a lot of times it's experiencing it for the first time. It's when you experience it for the first time and you realize not just what it does for the other person, but what it does for yourself, then you want to do it more. And that's kind of like, to an extent, of what happened to you, is you experienced what giving can do for somebody else and for yourself when you watched the My Wish thing. Obviously, it wasn't you in the situation, but you still experienced it from an external point of view, and that gave you even more spirit and more willingness to want to do that for other people. And so I think if people experience it for the first time, that'll spark them to do it more.
You hit it right on the head. Perfect. Yeah.
Solid. I want to finish with this. Before, that's not the last question, but you've talked, you know, a couple times in this podcast now about your faith and about God and how He has worked in your life to kind of bring you to where you are today. Do you personally get any flack, negative feedback from players, other teams, like crap from other players and other teams, or just general negative feedback for it? And if so, how do you block it out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's twice I think you've asked me questions no one's ever asked me. But yes, I have. I won't say at what point in my career, but there was one time where I was posting Bible verses and different things, and I just remember, you know, some people came in and were like, you know, like, I got to unfollow you, I got to do this, or I got to mute you, or something like that. And, you know, like, I know some people will use the example of like, well, you know, Paul was crucified for Christ and all these different things. And it's like, brother, me receiving that small little bit of, you know, whatever is nowhere near in comparison to proclaiming my faith in front of a Roman assembly where I may be or may not be crucified. But it is this small thing that I'm called to strengthen my faith. And that's how I see it. It's something where, you know what, like, I don't believe in pushing religion, right? I just believe in expressing my faith. And I express my faith because I know how many times God has saved me. It's like almost doing an in-service if I were not to talk about him, if I were not to praise him, if I were not to talk about him, because of all the good things he's done. And if anything, I want those good things to happen for other people. You know, I want everyone to experience the love and joy and kindness that comes from the heart of Christ. And I know that, you know, like, I got nothing. I grew up Catholic. I got nothing against Catholicism, but, you know, like when I was in college, you know, I struggled with my faith because I felt the need to feel like I had to be perfect. You know, I remember sitting in this Catholic campus ministry and being like, some girl was talking about, I forget what it was, like the Victoria's Secret fashion show or something like that. And I was like, yeah, Justin Bieber's performing. And she's like, you're going to watch that? And I was like, am I not allowed to? You know, like, I felt like always, but that was a personal thing, not anything on them. And I remember once I got to Nashville and I read this book recently called Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. And it talks about sort of the heart of Christ is this beautiful heart that when we think we sin, we're subtracted from Christ. But in actuality, he's really pulling us to him even more. It's like no guilt, no dirt, no shame, no anything can take us away from God. It's the opposite. He's actually calling us more into him. And it's like any small little thing that anyone says to me or does to me, if anything, it's going to strengthen my faith towards him because I'm going to lean more on God and ask him for wisdom and guidance. How do I handle this situation? How do I do this without either approaching it with anger or this or that, whatever it is? And I think another thing too, a beautiful thing about playing in the South is that so many people are believers. You know, like I've gotten to meet with either young kids or families or different people who have been like, man, like that Bible verse you posted today really touched me. Or like, you know, like they were able to see Christ through their struggle. One kid just went through an ACL tear and I was sort of working with him and his family a little bit and, you know, just to like lean in on Christ. And I learned more from him than I could have taught him, you know? And he was like, yeah, man, like this is what God is doing. I'm like, dude, wow. You know, like, so any small little thing like that, you just brush it aside, man. You know, you if anything, it makes you love God even more, you know, because you turn to him more.
That's awesome. That's a good approach. It's a very cool, calm, collected, and humble approach, and I think that's really cool. I think it's really cool. Well, Taylor, before I ask the last question, man, I just want to acknowledge you for the reasoning why you wanted to get into professional sports in the first place, to help have this, you know, see it as an ability to have a platform to serve others and to lift others up, and to give something to them and therefore then experience what they are able to give you back in return. And for you to, I want to acknowledge you for your career as well, like getting the MLS, being signed by the MLS team when they made the transition. I know that was something that was not offered to a lot of people, and it was something that you didn't even necessarily maybe expect, but I want to acknowledge you for putting in the hard work necessary to be able to get that contract. So that's awesome.
Humbling words coming from you, man, because for me, like what you do, that's like the ultimate goal. You know, like you are literally taking what you're learning, applying it, showing people that they can live a better life. Like to me, that is the goal of what I think we live to do. You know, and looking at your Instagram, the things like I knew about the golf thing before you said it because it was in one of your like circles, and I was like, dang, he's really applying this to every avenue. I was like, I gotta sharpen my tools, you know, like I gotta reassess what areas I'm neglecting, because it's like, that's awesome. It's amazing to see.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys don't follow Taylor on Instagram yet, make sure you go follow him at Taylor Washington.
Lots of puppy pictures.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And obviously, if you're in Nashville, make sure you go to a Nashville Soccer Club game. I've been to 2 or 3 now in the new stadium. It is a blast. I mean, it was cool in Nissan Stadium, but it was just such a big stadium in the new park, and it is awesome. It's electric. There's not a bad seat in the house. The experience is great. And so you guys need to make sure you go check it out if you have not yet already. But Taylor, last question here is, I think that to get closer to the best version of yourself is both a constant journey and a unique journey. I don't think that we ever actually get to the best version of ourselves. And I also think that the way that I'm going to journey towards the best version of myself is going to be a little bit different than the way that you get closer to the best version of yourself. So the last question is for you personally. If there were 3 things that you could currently do or 3 things that you could currently work on to get closer to that best version of Taylor Washington that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
I love that. I think you hit it on the head, and I hate to steal it, but it's like recognizing your own path and walking it. Like you said, what works for you may not work for me. And I think once we realize sort of who we are, when we start to love ourselves more, when we start to realize the way that I think is how God made me to be and how I can be the best version of who I am in my career, in my relationships, in my day-to-day life. I think we can sort of sharpen our skills in those areas. And then because we sharpen our skills in the major things, then we can focus on the small things. The second thing I would do is how you said it. It's like, if I'm going to the grocery store, I want to be the best version of myself. So it's sort of like, for me, it's like sort of taking a deep breath before I walk into situations. For me, it's praying. For me, it's, being in constant prayer. I will say this, growing up Catholic, we do know how to pray certain things. So staying in constant prayer, staying in that constant thought of always being the best version of you, and recognizing that like we can always sort of reach a higher version of ourselves. And I think you hit it too, like we're never going to be the best version of ourselves, but there's a beauty in that as well, that like we can continue to chase for it. And even though we may not achieve it, it's like a runner running a race in a movie, and that guy like sacrifices his life to push another runner to cross the finish line. There's sort of that beauty in that, not achieving that. And then 3, I would say, and I need more help, Lord knows, than anything. It's like, once we get over ourselves, I'm giving a talk tomorrow to the Lipscomb Soccer Kids team, and I'm like, once I realized I had to get over myself, the pride, the whatever it is, the ego, it is in that moment that you realize, once you start living for other people or a higher purpose, you sort of see the blessings and the different things around you. And you start to notice the breath of, or the smell of the flowers. You start to notice the little things around you that sort of just make your days a little bit better. And then it's like you said, experiencing that community thing means so much more. And you live a more fulfilled, purpose-driven life.
Yeah, those were good. I like that last one. Get over yourself more. I mean, that's so true. That's so true. It's one of those things where it's like, you are obviously super important as an individual, but it's like, nobody, like, get over yourself.
Yeah, there's a great quote from Van Wilder, which I know is like probably it's one of my favorite movies, one of the funniest movies, but it's like, don't take life too seriously because you'll never get out alive.
Yeah, seriously.
It's like, be as hard-nosed as getting better, but also realize I can breathe.
Yeah. It's always a delicate balance to try to like emotionally handle that, and also like practically, how do you apply that on a day-to-day basis, right? It's like, yes, like work to get better, but also like don't take, like you said, don't take yourself too seriously, and don't get all emotionally bent out of shape if
things don't go the way they do.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Well, great stuff today, Taylor. I know everybody is going to absolutely love it. So you guys make sure you go follow Taylor on Instagram if you don't already, at Taylor Washington, and make sure that you use the gifts that you have and follow your own path. Like you said, recognize your own path, follow it, and do what you can to be in service of others. But Taylor, that's all I got today, man. I really appreciate it.
Dude, Nick, this was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.